All right, thank you very much, my dear students, for the wait. Now let's move on to the second part of lecture. As I just said that about this that why learning doesn't happen, four immediate factors to break down, right, which have been discussed in the previous session. All right, let me take you now to certain reasons. The first, the children often see here. Children often arrive in school unprepared to learn. When the children are not prepared actually to learn, how can we say? And there might be some reason, for example, malnutrition, illness, low parental investment, and the harsh environments associated. These might be the reason which make the student and the children to be unprepared. All right. So the second factor, all right, teacher often lack. What they do there? They lack the skills or motivation. They do not care. They damn care rather. To motivate their students for learning. And third, inputs often fail to reach the classroom. All right, to effect learning. When they do, devoting enough resources to education is crucial. So these are the factors which even every common average student faces. So therefore, obviously it would have certainly an impact upon the learning of students there. Similarly, many technological interventions fail before they reach classroom. And even when they do make it to classroom, they often do not enhance teaching or learning. You see there, just let me give you an example from university. Rather, university is quite rich in terms of money in finances, But I think we have installed our LMS system there. And you can see that most of our students, they are complaining that they do not have access to our LMS there. And the reason that they do not actually being taught through LMS. So there are certain reasons. So actually, some technological interventions they also fail before they reach actually to the classroom there. And fourth, which is very very important, poor management and governance, which is a very very important, and particularly in our university setup. Now you see that if you look at the pharmacy registration issue in our university, that has been coming for the last 10 years. But I think due to the poor management in governance, we're still unable to have solved that issue there. So now a very very important part of this lecture is that what are actually the characteristics of learner which are very relevant to teaching. Who are the actual learner and what qualities they should have. All right, you must look at them. Learner learns and develop is a whole person. Remember, this is not something in bits we are not supposed to be learning there. This thing takes place as a whole. All right, and the learners, remember, what does it mean actually? Learners' cognitive, affective, physical, social, and emotional areas are intricately intertwined. Learning doesn't happen just in a single part, you see, or in a single aspect of individual, but this should come holistically, which lead to the development of all these skills. Children of the same age group may not exhibit uniform characteristics. We may have and we are having different capabilities students, so therefore they cannot be taught the same way. But unfortunately in our setup, if you look there, we do not have any facilitations to teach and treat them the same way. Learners learn best through active involvement and with concrete experiences. So do you think we are the students of literature? Do you know? Do we have similar environment there in our classroom which make all the students participate and involved, and with something concrete, which I think it's practically impossible there. All right. So, and one more thing, fourth, learners are curious, you see, and eager to learn. So do we have such learners who are curious and who are eager to learn? When the teacher fits learning environment to learner interests, needs, and their levels of maturity, they become highly motivated. But unfortunately, we do not look at student interest, we do not look at student needs, we do not even look at their levels, and we keep on teaching, and the result is just before you there, that learning is ineffective. Learners have different learning style, so we have to try to adjust ourselves according to them. Dr. Rita Dunn, Director International Learning Style, you can go and search her further if you are going if you are interested in actually learning style. Students can learn any subject matter when they are taught with methods and approaches responsive to their learning style. Now, I mean, if the approaches and the methods are actually responsive, then they can do the best. Now we are moving to the very important part. If you remember, we have discussed some approaches, there in the previous lecture. But today I'm going to expand actually this through this lecture. I mean, some other approaches there. Like, for example, approaches. What actually approaches are? Good teaching and good learning are linked through students' experience of what we do. It follows we cannot teach better unless we are able to see what we are doing from their point of view. Remember, I mean, if the students' actually interests are kept in view, and what is the needs of the student, what they really want to do, then we can make our teaching more effective, for them there. We have to first, talk about approach, method, procedure, and techniques. And remember, even if you go for your higher studies, I mean, like MPhil, like PhD, like postdoc, you must make yourself familiar with these terms. Like we say approach. What is approach? You have to know method, you have to know procedure, and you have to know techniques. All right, because they are intertwined, they are interconnected. You must try to know and differentiate, and then you must try to develop actually certain certain techniques and then certain things if you really want to do something very well. Let me first talk from approaches. Approach is a theory about learning, all right, or even a philosophy of how people learn in general, right? They can be psychologically focused, all right? They can be psychologically focused, such as behaviorism or cognitivism. Cognitivism and behaviorism. I think you must have been explained these things in the previous lecture, and particularly in psycholinguistics. Behaviorism, that was actually a thought which came from B.F. Skinner when he carried out most of the experiments actually on animals, and he concluded that actually language can be learned through habits, and then he actually linked it to that. And cognitivism did how actually our mind works actually, and how does our mind mature with the passage of time. They can also be based on older philosophies such as idealism, all right, or realism. And then we can say a way of dealing with the situation or problem, all right? A way of looking at teaching and learning, remember. An approach gives rise to methods. Like, I mean, these all things you see that actually they come under actually approach. But now you have to move, basically, an approach gives rise to methods. The way of teaching something which use classroom activities or techniques to help learners learn. And then you see the teachers select techniques from the various approaches according to different needs of their learner. I mean, keeping in view different approaches and different methodologies, and they come and they develop a kind of techniques actually at their own level in their respective context. An approach that leads to a method. Now you have to look at how does an approach lead to a method. All right, method is an application of an approach. Remember, method is, we can say, that approach that is a philosophy, right? That is that is a philosophy, that is a kind of behavior towards certain thing or a problem, while method, that is an actual application of that approach. In the context of teaching, remember, you must try to look at these things, and you must try to understand that actually method that is well established, right, that gets a kind of form, that becomes a kind of model, and that can be applied, you see, with its nitty-gritty there in any procedure. Well, procedure are, remember, step-by-step measures, okay, to execute a method. For getting, a method, you need some procedure, and procedures, they are step-by-step measures, all right. These step-by-step measures then are called techniques, and then every measure, that goes step-by-step, that is termed is technique. And technique is, remember, a single activity that comes from a procedure. A single activity, you do a single activity, you see, to reach actually, to reach actually something on a larger scale, all right. That term is, we can say that as a very initial and a basic step, for that. Any one of the step of the procedure list about quality is a technique. Naturally, various methods imply various techniques. So many methods, they have got their own actually techniques, okay. Further, we move on. Thus, we can say that teaching involves approaches. Remember, philosophies, broader philosophies. Some understanding towards problem that leads to method. And actually, when those thoughts, those philosophy, they become practical, and then they lead to methods. And methods, they are broken down actually into procedure, and procedure, they are collection of techniques. Obviously, then certain procedures actually are the collections of techniques, all right. And therefore, we can say the understanding how these concepts interrelate can help a teacher know, right, the reason behind their choices and how they choose, to teach. So thus we can say that right from approach, leading to methods, then actually come to procedure and techniques. And right, I just, if you remember, I even talk about actually the bottom up and the top down and the bottom up approaches there. Sometimes you have actually something right at the very large level, and then its effects trickle down there. So now I'm going to talk about teaching approaches. Some of the approaches and strategies, if you remember, I just gave you in the previous lecture, but actually now I'm moving on to some teaching approaches. The first one is going to be talk about is the teacher-centered approach, right? Teacher is perceived to be the only reliable source of information here, all right, in contrast to the learner-centered approach, right? And then we learner-centered approach, in which it is premise and belief that learner is also an important source. Learner has got a very, very important there, and he or she too knows something and therefore capable of sharing something, okay, right. So I'll stop here for a while. Okay, my dear, let me continue this. Obviously, subject matter centered approach. A subject matter gains primacy over that of learner. An interactive approach. In this approach, an interactive classroom will have more student talk. Remember, this has already been discussed before. And less teacher talk. Mostly, the student actually becomes very active and participating in this approach. And students are given the opportunity to interact with teacher and with students. All right, there. Then we can take a banking approach. This is another approach, another philosophy, another thinking about teaching, that a teacher deposits knowledge and to the empty minds of students for students to commit to memory. He tries, because the teacher is the ultimate source, basically in our context. But I think if you just happen to be there in a foreign land, there. So I think most of the time the student actually they are the bank of information, because they are put and they are exposed to different things there. So obviously I must say, and then we can say disciplinary approach. It limits the teacher to discussing his or her lesson within the boundary of his or her subject. Means a teacher doesn't go out actually of the scope of his of his subject. Then we can say individualistic approach. It wants individual student to work by themselves. Every student comes and every student is tasked individually for doing something there. And then we talk about direct teaching approach. The teacher directly tells or shows, demonstrate what is to be taught. And then indirect guided approach means that the teacher guides the learner to discover things for himself or herself. And the teacher facilitates the learning process by allowing the learner to be engaged in learning process with his art. Means mostly guidance comes over there. And then we have the inquiry approach. Obviously, as the term actually, so far the term is concerned, this approach teaches students to handle situations that meet under physical war. To use the inquiry approach in the teaching, you need to prepare activity that will allow students to develop inquiry skill. Means the students are tasked to look for something and they go is for some inquiry. Constructivist approach. The students are expected to construct knowledge, remember, knowledge, okay, and meaning out for what they are taught by connecting them to the prior experience. Alright, I mean, they are just exposed, they are just exposed, to construct their own knowledge. And constructivism emphasizes, remember, how individuals actively construct knowledge, remember, and understanding. So you have to just look at that. So it means you understand it now. You are supposed to construct knowledge and meaning out for which you are taught. Social constructivist approach, remember. Social constructive approach emphasizes the social context of learning and that knowledge is mutually built and constructed. And then we say collaborative approach. Is the word is there. It will welcome group teamwork in this teamwork, group work, partnerships, and group discussions. Mostly it revolves around actually the group. I'll be talking about the collaborative classroom, but stay tuned, I'll come to that as well. Alright, thank you, stay tuned my dear.